If you are a fan of science fiction television, and also enjoy cartoons with a bit of adult humor, you have probably watched more than your fair share of Adult Swim's hit show, Rick and Morty. You might have also gotten into the precursor of that series, the Matt Groening creation Futurama, another series that wove sci-fi elements in with its humor. But these two shows have a lot more in common than just sharing similar genres. In fact, if you have spent any time hanging around sites like Reddit, you might have heard more than a few people call Rick and Morty a ripoff of Futurama. Now, we aren't gonna go quite that far. The work that Dan Harmon and Justin Roiland have put into their show deserves more respect than that. But the similarities are pretty striking. And as a huge fan of Futurama, it's actually my favorite TV show of all time, it's sort of hard to ignore. So for the sake of showing some love for both series, in this video I'm going to take a look at a couple of times when Rick and Morty did something that Futurama did first. So sit back, drink some Slurm, chow down on some poplars, and let's get right into it.
Who will make Bender waffles just the way he likes them now?
Okay, so both series deal with major science fiction tropes, and two of the most common ones are time travel and alternate dimensions. While Rick and Morty doesn't really do traditional time travel, Futurama has in the past, and it has caused some rather major issues on a few occasions. One such situation occurred during the episode The Late Philip J. Fry. In the episode, Fry, Bender, and the Professor were caught in a rather nasty predicament, having to travel forward through history right past the end of the universe so that they could come back around to their own time, since apparently time is secular. When they successfully do so, they wind up accidentally crushing their previous selves. The episode ends with a shot of Bender burying the bodies of their past versions, a shot that is very similar to one that occurred in the Rick and Morty episode Rick Potion number 9, where the pair wind up having to bury alternate universe versions of themselves after Rick turns their home universe into one infested by grotesque Cronenberg-esque monsters. While it's not note for note exactly the same, it is similar enough to have people noting the similarities between these two situations, something that we'll see a lot of in this video. Let's take a second to talk about two of the main protagonists of the series, specifically Fry from Futurama and Morty from Rick and Morty. Both characters are often played up as, well, not exactly the most intelligent people, but this is perhaps one of their strongest features. See, in the Futurama episode The Day the Earth Stood Stupid, it was revealed that Fry was the only one capable of fighting off a race of flying brains, due to the fact that he lacked a specific brainwave. So basically, he was so dumb, and inbred, but that's a whole other discussion, that he was able to succeed where others couldn't. Morty is said to sort of serve a similar purpose, as his specific brainwaves, called Morty waves by Rick, help mask Rick from detection, hence why all Ricks need a Morty. Let's throw an Easter egg out there, shall we? Since it's starting to look like the creators of Rick and Morty are fans of Futurama, so how about a reference to the latter in the former? During the episode The Rick Shank Rickdemption, there is a shot where Jerry is flying through the air, and if you look in the far background, there is a certain ship that might be a bit recognizable to Futurama fans. That ship right there looks pretty freaking similar to the Planet Express ship from Futurama. The coloration is about spot on. The odd shapes near the back could be variations of the fins, and if you look really closely, you can almost barely make out the red stripe that runs down the middle. And this wouldn't be the only time that the Planet Express ship would appear adjacent to a Rick and Morty character, though this next reference comes courtesy of a third party, The Simpsons themselves. The Simpsons couch gags are legendary. As something that occurs before pretty much every episode, they have sometimes gotten fairly elaborate. One such couch gag saw Rick and Morty literally bursting into the Simpsons' home, leaving them as nothing more than a giant pile of goo. Trying to fix this, Rick sends Morty with a sample of the family puddle through a portal to get them cloned. When Morty goes through, the world on the other side is just chock full of Futurama references. First up, the aforementioned ship flies through the background. Then Morty walks past a Slurm vending machine. and in the background we eventually see a man with a brain slug on his head. As Matt Groening created both shows, it makes sense to reference Futurama here. But it was yet another situation that fanned the flames of the discussion about Futurama's influence on the younger show. Okay, alright, enough with the references. Let's get back to examples of Rick and Morty quote-unquote ripping off Futurama. Some fan-favorite episodes of Rick and Morty are the Interdimensional Cable episodes, which see the family kicking back, watching a series of largely disconnected, one-off stories via TV. Sounds a lot like a pair of episodes from Futurama, Anthology of Interest 1 and 2, which saw the members of the Planet Express crew watching a series of one-off, largely disconnected what-if scenarios on a television-like device. Both series of episodes on both shows give us an excuse to dive into a bunch of one-off stories, giving us a break from the main plots of the shows. But it makes you wonder if the Rick and Morty creators had seen the Futurama episodes before making Interdimensional Cable. I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say, yeah, they probably did. You know what's worse than being a genius surrounded by people who couldn't possibly match your intellect? Being a genius stuck in the body of a feeble old man. This is a problem that faces both Rick and, to a greater degree, Professor Farnsworth. However, both of them seem to have had the same general idea for how to deal with this issue. In the episode Big Trouble in Little Sanchez, we found out that Rick was working on cloning himself, leaving him with a much younger version of Rick, the aptly named Tiny Rick, who he transferred his consciousness into. Years before this though, in the Futurama episode A Clone of My Own, we met Qbert, the young clone of the professor, who he had developed in a test tube in order to carry on his work once he passed on. Seems oddly familiar, wouldn't you agree? In the episode Amazon Women in the Mood, the Planet Express crew, along with Zap Brannigan and Kiff, find themselves on a planet completely populated by giant, brutish women. Things go pear-shaped pretty quickly, with Amy having to attempt to break the men out before they are put to death by Snoo Snoo. This is sort of similar to the Rick and Morty episode Raising Gazorpazorp, though the genders are largely flipped, with the male-centered planet causing issues for Summer. Same similar ideas, though just different enough, I suppose. What is a good science fiction series without some memorable aliens? Luckily, both Rick and Morty and Futurama have more than their fair share of those. But there is a pair of these aliens that seem more than just a little similar to each other. In the Futurama episode where no fan has gone before, we met Mel Var, a gaseous, energy-based being who really liked Star Trek. Anyways, compare him to the oh-so-lovingly named Fart from the Rick and Morty episode Morty Night Run, who is yet another gaseous being that honestly looks just like Mel Var if someone stuck the Infinity Stones in him. Now, gas-based beings aren't unheard of in other sci-fi properties, but they aren't exactly the most common type of aliens. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if Fart's creation was inspired by Mel Var. Hey, you know what's always fun? Inner Space. Remember that movie? Where Dennis Quaid went inside Martin Short in a technologically advanced, shrunk-down ship? Ah, good times. But random movies from the 80s aside, there is definitely something fun about the idea of exploring the world that exists inside a human body on a microscopic level. And Rick and Morty did something like this in the episode Anatomy Park, where we found out that there was a sort of bizarre amusement park that was set up inside the body of a homeless man that Rick built. This is kind of similar to what we saw in the Futurama episode Parasites Lost. This episode gave us a look inside of Fry, as some superworms had established an entire society inside his intestines. While the idea of exploring the inside of a body is a classic sci-fi trope, having entire complexes and even entire society pop up inside of someone is just unique enough that it's sort of hard to ignore the similarities. Finally, let's end this video on something that actually brought an end to Futurama itself: time freezing. In the final episode of Futurama, we saw Leela and Fry getting the opportunity to live out their lives together, while the rest of the world was stuck, frozen in time. It was a really sweet way to end the series, and such an amazingly out there sci-fi premise. And Rick and Morty did something similar during the beginning of the episode A Wrinkle in Time, where Rick freezes time to give Summer and Morty time to clean the house after a giant party. And of course from there, hijinks ensue. It was a bit less of a serious situation that brought about the whole time freezing thing, but it was still the same general idea. Now I gotta ask, which of these two awesome shows are you a fan of? Let us know your thoughts down in the comments below. And while you're down there, why not consider subscribing to ScreenRant for even more awesome videos just like this in your feed each and every day. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in the world of tomorrow!